I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. Not like here. Here everything is soft and smooth.
In my last prequel video, I talked about the Phantom Menace, and I thought things couldn't get any worse. Turns out, they can. Now, before I start ripping into this movie, there are a couple things that I want to address that I didn't talk about in the last video. Number one being that these movies have been out for 20 years, so that means that there's like a billion reviews on the internet, meaning that anything I say in this video, the last video, or the future video has probably already been said by somebody else. The second thing I want to talk about is that I know there's a lot of people that like these movies, and that's totally okay. Just because I don't like them doesn't mean you shouldn't. I'm just making these videos for fun and because I like reviewing movies. Now with that said, let's get into the video. Most times I like to rewatch movies or TV shows before reviewing them, but honestly, I was just going to try and skate past and just make this review without having to rewatch it, because this is my personal least favorite Star Wars film. Even growing up as a little kid, I hated it, even though I loved episodes 1 and 3. It was honestly really hard to pick between this one or The Phantom Menace, but I think this one is just slightly worse, mainly because of the plot and characters. In The Phantom Menace, the characters have little to no traits. They are basically just plot robots. In this movie, they do have traits, but all their traits are awful and don't fit the characters for what they would be like during this time in their lives. In this movie, Anakin went from being a little kid to a creepy child-murdering Jedi Padawan. And then in Revenge of the Sith, they try to backtrack and be like, oh no, Anakin was a good guy. He definitely didn't kill all those children sand people. Obi-Wan in this movie went from having no traits to having some good and some bad. His good traits are that he's kind of charismatic and witty, but it's overshadowed because he is a bumbling idiot throughout the entire movie. I'll get into why later. And Padme is still a really lame character. Yoda is a fool. He has his vision clouded by Sidious the entire movie. Also, Yoda is a war general now. This really bothers me. Yoda shouldn't support the war, he should be against it and opt for peace instead. It could have created a really interesting dynamic if every Jedi was participating and supporting the war except for Yoda. I just feel like Yoda is too wise to go in guns blazing with a bunch of clones and start doing ninja flips with Dooku. Which brings us to our next problem. Count Dooku. Count Dooku is so unimaginably dull, and he isn't even in the movie until around the 1 hour and 10-minute mark. He's the main villain, and the first time we see him is past the halfway point. In A New Hope, you see Darth Vader pretty much right away. This allows us to have time to understand his personality and have his character fleshed out throughout the entirety of the movie. In this movie, it feels like Dooku is just there for the arena scene and to give our main heroes a lightsaber duel. So now that we've gone over the characters, let's go over the plot, because my god, it is bad. After rewatching both The Phantom Menace and this movie, I sincerely believe that the plot of this movie is considerably worse. So the movie starts off with an assassination attempt on Padme. Palpatine wants her dead because she's going to vote against the creation of the clone army. Her ship blows up and her decoy dies, and then the decoy says she's sorry for failing Padme, even though her sole purpose is to die and keep Padme alive instead. Also, does every politician have decoys? Because we've only seen them with Padme. I don't know. Then Padme and Anakin meet up, and it is a little cringe, but it hasn't crossed the line yet with the dialogue. Then, even though Padme had an attempt on her life, literally within the last hour or two, she hangs out in broad daylight in a room with giant windows. And then later that night, she sleeps alone with the blinds open. Woman, are you trying to die? They say they are using her as bait, but that's kind of stupid considering that if they had chosen any other option besides these little bugs, Padme would have been dead. The movie also specifically says that Padme scratched out the cameras in her room because she didn't like Anakin watching her. You're pretty lucky that Anakin and Obi-Wan can sense that you were about to die. Which brings me to my next point. If Palpatine can blind the entire Jedi Order, including Yoda, to the fact that he's a Sith Lord, why can't he just blind Anakin and Obi-Wan to the fact that Padme's about to die? It's not like there's a range in how far Palpatine has to be from the Jedi to keep them blinded in this way. Because if there was, then some Jedi would probably figure it out by now that he's a Sith. We've also been shown that Force users can use the Force over many miles and even planets away. Mace Windu literally says later in this movie that the Jedi have been experiencing a weaker connection to the Force recently. I hate this style of writing where Palpatine only can see the future when the plot needs him to, and can only use his Force abilities when the plot needs him to. And anytime when the plot doesn't need him to, he can't. So anyways, they stop the attack on Padme, and then Obi-Wan jumps out the window and grabs the droid that made the attempt on Padme's life. Why does he do this? I do not know. It's like the characters in this movie are actively trying to die. This is also the first scene where Obi-Wan is stupid in this film, and there is still more to come. Then Anakin steals a speeder and catches up with Obi-Wan and saves him after he falls off of the droid. You're really lucky to be alive now, Obi-Wan. And then later, Anakin jumps out of the speeder and tries to capture the assassin who sent the droid to kill Padme, and Obi-Wan actually gets angry at him for this. Dude, you literally jumped out of the window, grabbed a tiny droid you didn't know could support your weight, fell hundreds of feet, and almost died, and you're actually gonna get mad at Anakin for this. I guess Obi-Wan's just really stupid in this movie. Once they finally do land, Anakin tells Obi-Wan that the assassin is a shapeshifter. Okay, this can make the scene more tense considering that they are in a bar with hundreds of people and she can be literally anybody. But she specifically decides not to and instead tries to kill Obi-Wan. Why did you make her a shapeshifter? She's not going to do any shape-shifting. Then Obi-Wan captures her and they try to figure out who sent her to kill Padme. But before she can get a word out, she gets shot and killed by Jango Fett. And what the funny thing is that he could have gone and killed Padme while Anakin and Obi-Wan were out and about, but instead he hunts down the assassin he hired and kills her instead. So that's the first act of the movie, and it's dumber than you can even imagine. So the second act must be better, right? No, it's actually worse. Even with all the problems I just listed about the first act, the second act takes the cake as what I consider the worst 40 minutes of Star Wars ever. This chunk of the movie revolves around Padme and Anakin hanging out and going on dates, and Obi-Wan finding out about the clones. And I'm going to start with the clones one because I need a mental break from the cringe. Obi-Wan learns about Kamino from a random guy that owns a diner on Coruscant who happens to know him. First off, why does this guy know about Kamino, but the Jedi archives don't? Somebody deleted Kamino from the archives, but who did? You'd think it was Palpatine, but he wanted somebody to find the clones, you know, so that they can go to war. Also, why do people think that making a whole new clone army is the best way of dealing with the Separatists? Are you saying that your galaxy-wide republic doesn't already have an army? And why couldn't you just have gotten a volunteer army? They clearly have the population to make that possible. Why would you spend all this extra money on making clones? The diner guy from earlier says that the Kaminoans aren't cheap, so now you've wasted time, money, and resources on a clone army you didn't need to make in the first place. Also, they say that the clones age at double the rate of normal humans, so I'm going to be generous and say that the fully grown clones here are around 20 years old, meaning that they are really 10 years old. This means that the clones were commissioned at least 10 years before the Separatists even existed. All the info was there for the Jedis to realize that the clones were kind of suspicious, but I guess all the Jedi were too dumb to figure it out. Speaking of dumb Jedi, let's talk about Obi-Wan in this movie. Obi-Wan is told that all the clones are cloned off of Jango Fett. He knows that Jango was one of the people who helped organize Padme's assassination attempt. He later finds out that Jango is also working for Count Dooku and the Separatists, and yet he never realizes that the clones are connected in any way to the Separatists, Count Dooku, you know, the bad guys. This is bad writing. I'm sorry to break it to you. The other part of the second act is Anakin and Padme, and these are some of the weirdest, cringiest moments of film I've watched recently. First off, in this movie, love is forbidden for Jedi. One of Anakin's first on-screen acts is confessing to Obi-Wan his love for Padme. The Jedi Council assign Anakin to be Padme's protector on Naboo. Even though Obi-Wan knows that this situation could subject Anakin and Padme to falling in love, he just goes along with it. He could have said anything to Yoda or Mace Windu, and Anakin would have just been a good guy the whole time. Also, having love forbidden for the Jedi has always seemed kind of strange to me. It kind of makes the Jedi seem like they're just these weird, emotionless monks who have no girlfriends. This one plot point already makes it way harder to just relate to the Jedi in general through these movies. And when you think about it, the Jedi Order is actually really sinister in these movies. They take away children from their mothers when they are toddlers, and then forbid them from having emotional attachments. Sounds to me like they're breeding insanity, because having to live through a parentless, emotionless world would make you go crazy. So anyways, Padme and Anakin go to Naboo so that Padme doesn't get killed. But why did the assassination attempts just stop? Doesn't Palpatine know what's going on and where they are? So then Padme and Anakin just hang out and spew the worst dialogue in any Star Wars movie. I honestly feel bad for the actors because they got a ton of backlash when this movie came out, but they're obviously trying their best. I don't even think the best actor could make this dialogue sound natural. So Padme knows that Anakin falling in love with her is against the Jedi code, and yet she brings him out to the most romantic locations and wears clothing that gets more and more revealing throughout the movie. And then every time Anakin makes a move, she just says, "I'm a senator, it can't happen," meanwhile she's leading him on throughout the whole movie. What kind of person does that? So anyways, Anakin decides to go see his mom because he's had nightmares about her dying. First of all, has he never gone back to see his mom over the 10-year course between this movie and the previous? And if so, why haven't the Jedi let him? The Jedi are seriously abusive to children's mental health. So Anakin finds his mom, and what do you know? She's dead.
What you say?
So then Anakin kills a whole squadron of sand people. Not just the men. But the women. And the children too. Anakin is ridiculously sinister in this movie. After this happens, Obi-Wan gets captured on Geonosis by Count Dooku. The Jedi, as well as Anakin, get the message that Obi-Wan is captured. Anakin and Padme decide to save Obi-Wan even though they're not supposed to because they say that the rest of the Jedi are too far away. First of all, the Jedi show up on Geonosis around the same time as Anakin does, and second of all, they had time to plant themselves in the audience and pick up an entire squadron of clones so that they can fight off the droids. So I guess they weren't that far away. This is again one of those throwaway lines that make the movie make that much less sense. And when Anakin and Padme do arrive on Geonosis, they are met with a CGI nightmare droid factory that they have to escape. They survive and then get captured. And they get thrown into an arena with Obi-Wan to get eaten by monsters. This scene is almost good until you realize that if Palpatine's plan is to turn Anakin to the dark side using Padme, then why would he leave her to die in this arena? This movie is just full of plot holes. So then all the Jedi show up to save the trio from the Pokemon, and they all fight a bunch of droids. And this battle is almost good, but the droids never feel like a real threat to the Jedi. This leads to the scene not feeling like there's very much tension at all. And if you don't take my word for it, let me have George Lucas explain this concept to you himself.
What you don't realize is that these guys really are not very efficient. These things, Jedi cut them down like they're butter, and they really are pretty useless.
See, I told you guys I wasn't lying. So now we are at the lightsaber duel, something you might think would be good, but this is probably the worst lightsaber duel in all of Star Wars. The choreography is really bland, and it's shot horribly. Look at this scene. What am I looking at right now? This looks awful. So now Yoda needs to fight Dooku because Anakin and Obi-Wan failed. Again, this just feels like a misinterpretation of what made Yoda so special in Empire. So Dooku escapes and meets up with Sidious, and Anakin and Padme get married even though they've only known each other for a week. And now, luckily, the movie is over. So in conclusion, pretty much everything is bad. The acting, the pacing, the effects, the writing, it's all very bad. Now I could keep going, but if I did that, I'd be here all day. So I'm just going to give this awful movie a 2 out of 10. And those 2 points are really only for the music, if I'm being honest. I think everything else legitimately fails in almost every regard of filmmaking.
Like a star, you can't stop my shine.